Welcome to the Expert Witness Podcast. I'm your host, David Smith. I'm excited to be here today with John Zeirke. John is a mechanical engineer. He's a licensed professional engineer in multiple states. He's an ACTAR certified accident reconstructionist, a certified vehicle fire investigator, and a certified drone pilot. After a decade and a half in industry, John has recently started his own company doing expert witness work. So, John, we're excited to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, one of the things I always like to ask is expert witness work seems to be a little known career choice. You don't hear kids talking about how they want to be an expert witness when they grow up, when they're in school. So, I'm always curious, how were you introduced to this type of work and how did you get into it?
It built over time. I think the first time I can remember actually hearing about being an expert witness in terms of especially an engineer I had a professor in college for machine design, and he had some more stories about testifying and different things. And so, I was like, that's kind of an interesting side hustle to have. But when you're 22, you don't know anything. So I just kind of put that off in the back of my head. But yeah, I took a pretty typical path out of school, got the bachelor's, worked as a design engineer. And I guess just over time, process of elimination of things I knew I didn't want to do later in my career. And then I just slowly, the whole idea of forensics and reconstruction and everything, I found that to be pretty interesting. And I went and got my PE, not really having a plan, but I figured, I don't know, maybe this would have, some benefit in the future. And it did. So, but yeah, I don't remember like a specific point, and certainly it's not brought up, like you said, in college as like a career path. And it's hard to do that when you're inexperienced anyway. You kind of probably need to get some much further education, research, or, industry work to really get to where you could call yourself an expert, quite honestly.
Yeah, that's definitely true. You do need to get the background experience, but once you have that and you get into the expert witness work, I've at least found it to be both challenging and rewarding work. So,
Mhm.
all right. So I understand you spent a significant amount of time actually doing work in industry. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience and how you rely on that for your expert witness work?
Yeah, so started out, and I don't mean to make it like a full straight CV, but I started out of school working at Caterpillar on the lower powertrain group for the large mining truck, like the Ultra Class 797, 400-ton payload. And, in those rear axles, our group kind of did the whole rear axle. And I had design responsibility for the planetary final drives at the end of the wheel stations there. So obviously torque is super important in those trucks. So you need extra reduction before that. And, worked there for 8 or 9 years. My biggest project there was kind of a large scope development project, was the first electric drive mining truck that CAT had done. So instead of having, transmission, differential, and then these mechanical final drives, they went to electric AC motors in the wheel stations. So you needed much different or much higher ratios. And so that was kind of a complete tear up, new design. And the product cycle on that type of equipment, you don't just turn them around immediately. It takes a little while to even procure parts. But I was able to work through that program, and that gave me a lot of experience in clean sheet design. Caterpillar makes like everything, gears. They're like a gear company in and of itself. So that was a lot of, your typical design work, CAD and everything, but then also having to work through the development, chase some problems, also have design responsibility for the existing designs, and and everything. So, and that was very, very much mechanical, nuts, bolts, screws, gears, all that. But, it was cool, and it's cool stuff to work on. Made that transition then. What brought me up to the Twin Cities up here was working at Polaris. And I got in there at a time, I was brought into the Slingshot team, the three-wheel roadster vehicle you might see out there. And it was basically, it had been a really small team doing the initial design and development. And at some point they said, okay, we're going to definitely go with this thing. There was a lot of questions about regulatory for something like that unique. So I think there was some pause, but eventually they said, okay, we're doing this, so we need to like ramp up a real team. And so that was my in at Polaris. So super different product, fast paced. It was like hitting everything to get this thing ready for production. And so I think I started like 6 months before we launched it to the public, and then it's probably another close to 6 months before we were shipping units. But getting in, it was like all hands on deck. So it's like, here's an issue, the steering, here's an issue, brakes or suspension or driveline, and or even paint, plastic, something like that. So you got to sort through as much of that as you can, and then the dust settles, and then the team gets formed, and then you usually, as a design engineer, they kind of whack the vehicle up into systems or areas, and then everyone has their responsibility. And my primary responsibility was the driveline, which in that vehicle consists of a manual transmission, drive shaft, a right angle gearbox, like spiral bevel, and then a belt drive, like a motorcycle. So, the front's like a car, back's like a motorcycle. And I could go on and on about all the lessons learned there. I still have PTSD and some of the NVH issues, but anyway, went through that. Had a big program that I worked on there where we were, it was basically the second gen version of the Slingshot, which came out, I think 2020 model year. It was after I was gone, but we had done most of the development. And the big scope was Polaris having their own engine. We had used a GM engine to start. And so that new engine allowed a big enough scope program where we went through a lot of the systems, including the driveline. So I went from having to like kind of massage and improve a design that existed to now we can take that and do a bigger scope project, which is cool. But then also, in addition to that, I had a role there, and this is probably where I started really transitioning more into thinking about the forensic side. It was like a product safety, product quality type role where I was taking in all the different streams of information from like warranty or, customer complaints, even like forum and social media type posts, anything that was raising any potential flag about the Slingshot. We'd bring all those in kind of like a funnel, and you do like preliminary checks, and you look for trends and different things like that. And then along the way, when there's things that are not explained by simple things like, oh, this was an idiot who crashed, and blame the vehicle. Sometimes that happens, but you're looking for issues, and anyone can go to NHTSA and see just about every car has recalls, and the Slingshot early on especially did have some. So we worked to, you're gathering information. I was kind of the point person, and then, if it's a steering issue, you bring in the steering expert as well. But basically, there was a game plan we came up with on how to investigate issues like that. When you're at the company, the design, testing history, you can test and validate certain issues or try to replicate them. And then there's a series of levels. I'm assuming most companies have this, series of escalation levels to an issue, with the top obviously being a safety recall if you have to do that. And that top line, that's when you go to the boardroom in the headquarters, and you pretty much know you're going to recall something then. But but along the way, there's other avenues. There's technical service bulletins and stuff like that, or pretty minor things can be rolled into the next running change or something like that. So you always are evaluating, what is the nature of the issue, and getting to root cause is like super intense to do that as soon as possible, because after that you still have to do, that's when like the work begins. How are we going to fix it? When can we fix it? Sometimes you're like interim corrective fix, which is like maybe, just to throw numbers out, maybe like 80% solution that we can do right away, and the 99% of solution is going to take longer. Maybe you do it in steps, or maybe whatever. And the exciting part of that, you never want to go through those things, of course. You would love everything to be easy, but the exciting part is like, it's like all hands on deck, and any sort of barriers or red tape gets put aside, and you start to go, no, we need to be in the test lab for this, or we need priority on this or that. And you're trying to get to the bottom line, and just be able to give guidance to management. And to their credit, when we needed to do something, they always did it. They always fought, but they always want to know that we've like investigated it. So yeah, long story short, I understood the recall process and the investigation process, and I could see how that kind of dovetailed with like the forensic consulting side and the reconstruction. And we were having to look at accidents that happened, or fires, are a big thing. So you start to pick up that type of experience. And I don't know exactly, again, it kind of built over time, but at some point you start to see this path. And I'd got my PE back when I was at Caterpillar for no real reason, but that's a barrier of entry to get into expert witness work, and not a lot of mechanicals have that, unless they're doing, I think maybe HVAC people usually have it or something. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, that's kind of the long story short. I did some design work. I've been through that process of design, test, break, redesign, fix stuff. And there's certainly forensic work going on within that. And it's under a time crunch, because even if it's pre-production, you might be halting a development of some sort, if whatever happens. And stuff does happen. I mean, it's never smooth, right? And so it's good to have been through that stuff. It's stressful at times, and you don't want to be the one on the hot seat, but everyone takes their turn, it seems like, in that deal. And then but yeah, now I'm in the point where you get into the forensic side, you're not creating things as much as you're analyzing. But the cool part, and when I transitioned, I worked at Rimkus, so a large company, consulting company. So it was a career change. So it's kind of the way to go for me. I don't think I could have just moved into doing this on my own immediately. I wouldn't have known where to start, really. But yeah, like the variety is key, I think. And you're more well-rounded, and really you're kind of more valuable, the more experience, the more gray hair you get too. So there's some career progression, like reasons to get into this too, beyond it just being rewarding and enjoyable. It's kind of one of those things where, again, like, you could probably do it once you get established, you could probably do it as long as you want. And at least that's what we're hoping, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like you got a lot of really good experience and good background to really add technical know-how on what's actually happening in these companies. Uh, Oftentimes, expert witnesses or academics or college professors. Do you think there are benefits to approaching expert work from coming from industry as opposed to coming from academia?
Obviously my path was industry. Maybe I'm biased, but it's worked for me. but there's a lot of different types of expert witnesses. Obviously, you've interviewed a lot of them on
Mhm.
this podcast, but so it kind of depends on the area you're in. Um, Obviously, I just have a bachelor's degree. I'm just a lump of coal here, but people with PhDs, they get much more into the details of complex topics, and then I think research certainly can provide a lot of insight to different specifics. And there's other things related to like maybe the biomech side, or related to medical side or something like that, where you probably need those grad degrees and maybe a mix of industry. But I mean, our job it is kind of common sense in a way. You have to have practical knowledge. And I always think it's good to have that, industry experience and kind of know, especially I guess in the work I'm doing now, when you're maybe commenting on whether you think something is a product issue or not. For me to be able to say, yes, I've been in that, I know how the sausage is made, so to speak. That works for me again. But I definitely, I'm sure, and again, I brought up my professor. He's PhD, mechanical engineering. I can't remember how much industry experience he had, but just as a subject matter expert, he was obviously valuable enough to be brought in to do expert witness work. So yeah, I guess it's kind of depends on what you're into.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen good and bad experts come both from academia and from industry. So there are certain advantages and disadvantages to each, but both can be excellent and both can be subpar. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
all right. So, we mentioned that you recently started your own company and you did some work at Rimkus before. Were there any barriers or obstacles you had to overcome getting into expert witness work? Did the cases come slowly, or have you been in high demand from day one?
Well, um, it's kind of a mix. We didn't really have Minneapolis was kind of a newer market for Rimkus, and just for the type of work I was doing. Um, Fortunately, they had a kind of a long-term view. It was like, this might take a little while to ramp up. I mean, I had work right away, um, but also in time to ramp up, it gave me time to pursue more training in the reconstruction and get some of those certifications in the fire and everything. But I'd say I'd say it really took maybe a year and a half or so to ramp up, to have consistent amount of work, and then COVID happened, and then it shut off completely for a short time, and then it ramped way up. And I think that's when I really ramped up to kind of like pretty pretty much the highest hours I was getting, which was all good, right? You want to be busy, and I think it helped me to kind of cast a wider net. You don't want to be someone who's like too general and you definitely don't want to get out of your lane, obviously,
Mhm.
because you're not really an expert in something like that. So you have to know when to say no, but also, you know, I was willing to get out of my comfort zone, and I thought it was also a good idea. And again, the advantage of working at a company with a ton of experts, you could pick up the phone and, you know, it, you certainly could get support, that way.
Mhm.
And you got to get experience somehow. So you got to get it going, and then you get experience. Then you're kind of into an area that you wouldn't have been in before. So um, you got to have patience and everything. And now that I'm going to be on my own here, I'm going to have patience with that as well. But just one day at a time, right? And you got to take the long-term view. I'm still
Absolutely.
I'm still pretty young for this type of field. You go to inspections, there's a lot more gray hair and things like that with other experts. So um, I'm mid-career, if that. So just got to keep moving forward and stay out of your comfort zone and be willing to try things and always got to keep learning, right? Everything's changing. So, um, but yeah, it's been a progression.
Very good. Yeah, there's definitely some benefits to working in a company with other experts, just being able to, bounce ideas off of other people or, see if they see things from a different angle can be really beneficial to a case. Uh, so with your background and experience, what type of cases do you commonly work on? And, without sharing any confidential information, can you give us an example of a case and the types of situations that call for your expertise?
Yeah. So, there's a stream of work that is kind of simpler, insurance type investigations or, um, there's that level. Then there's, big legal cases with a lot of exposure, and everything in between. So just like scale wise, I've been a part of some pretty large cases that way. Um, but I'll work for insurance adjusters. I'll work for attorneys directly. And so, there'll be subrogation type situations, where there's multiple parties, um, you know, product liability, things like that. Um, so in a lot of times you get those cases where the incident itself is maybe a crash or a fire. But ultimately the question is, did the vehicle or the machine contribute to that? Was it part of it? Sometimes there's known issues with specific vehicles or machines or products or whatever. So you're maybe bouncing it off that. But yeah, it's pretty much the investigation side of things. And, I guess if I broke it down, it's kind of crashes and mechanical failures and fires, but it all kind of is part of engineering, really. It's just different venues. But, I wanted to have experience and training in just origin and cause for fire and for accident reconstruction and kind of know how that plays into it as well. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it is. It's been mainly on the forensic side. Um,
Mhm.
I'm open to doing more, based on my design experience, doing more maybe design consulting, ideating on how to fix any sort of issues we find, or be a part of that root cause investigation as well. Just to kind of be on the side of it, like improving things, making things is kind of a, that was a rewarding thing in and of itself as well, to know that you contributed to making something that's out there, on the roads.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Uh, it was so my grandpa did a lot of work. He worked with a bunch of companies that did mobile equipment. And after when I was in college, I went on a road trip with him from California up to Utah, and just every time we drive by a construction site, he's like, I designed that, or I worked on that. He's like, you know why that's that way? And it was fun to learn from him and also see all of the products that he'd worked on out on the road.
Mhm.
Uh, that's still one of the highlights of my life. I remember that particular road trip and look back on that with fondness.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So, in your expert work, are most of your cases local? Do you work nationwide? Do you have a preference?
I'm, I mean, when I was with Rimkiss, we have experts all over. So you kind of get your geographical region, but mine was pretty big just based on being kind of on an island. So I, drive quite a bit for, I'd be out to the Dakotas or Iowa or even Nebraska a little bit, Wisconsin. So I've got licenses and kind of those 6 states, Illinois. Um, and so that's just kind of generally where I've gone. I would anticipate, based on experience speaking with other independent people, you might be flown out. It kind of depends on, I did a few trips at Rimkiss where it was like a Caterpillar specific thing or a Polaris specific thing where,
Hmm.
they kind of, yeah, they saw a need that there is worth me traveling a further distance. But yeah, I mean, I think that might change over time. So far, it's been all within driving distance, which is, it's good to have your tools and have some flexibility, not be in airports all the time, but you got to be willing to travel. That's part of this gig.
Yeah, I agree. For us, there's not a lot of people that have, not a lot of independent people that have experience with like garbage trucks or aerial lifts, or we've got one guy that does ski lifts. And to find somebody outside of industry that can go in and look at that, we end up going all over the country because of that. So.
Mhm.
Uh, And it's fun too. It's fun to go see things in different places and, see the different things that are happening. So let's talk generally about expert witness work. What do you enjoy about it? Why did you decide to go out on your own and make this your career?
Well, I think to start, it's the practical side of it, getting, a lot of reps and like, learning about different things and different specific equipment, so like if you work on vehicles and equipment, there's so many different types out there.
Hmm.
And, I always believe that that experience translates machine to machine, but you're starting with, okay, well, how does this one work? And getting into that. Um, and kind of building your expertise that way, which is just fun and rewarding. And also you can, these are kind of mini projects, and sometimes they drag on for a while or go away and come back or whatever if they're legal. But they're mini projects with a start, end, and a finish. And there's a work product, our report and or our testimony is like our work product. Um, so it's kind of nice. You get that cycle and you get, reps that way. But then also just the nature of it and the challenge for me initially was, and I guess I always struggled starting out when you're presenting up the chain, when I was in industry, the higher levels you got, the more you needed to like get down to the basics of like, what is your point? I think somebody told me once, like we asked you what time it was and you told us how to make a watch. So um, it's actually a challenge, and it's something about this career you need to be able to explain, especially if you're going to get all the way to like where you're in front of a jury. Like you're
Hmm.
going to have all the stuff floating around your head, and we know all the details and everything, but ultimately, like, what's the question that you're trying to answer, and how do you explain that in a way that everyone can understand? Because that's how you really be an effective expert. You could be really intelligent or know all the details, which you have to be competent to call yourself an expert. Obviously, you need the experience and the education, but it's a communication thing, right? And
Hmm.
you get to meet a lot of different people too. Like in some ways, it's kind of a isolated job because you're not in a cubicle with a bunch of people around you all the time that you get to know really well, but you'll be meeting people, different clients and different, people that you meet out in the field. And that's also interesting as well. Um, I'm not a complete introvert like some engineers, so I don't mind speaking with people. and, yeah, so, I mean, it's a lot of things. I mean, I think ultimately, you're contributing something that you're contributing and people understanding, a certain issue or what happened. And it's a puzzle too, right? Like, as from doing this, that you come into something and you have no information. So you're just trying to gather information. Then you're trying to put the pieces together, and it can be frustrating at times, but it's obviously rewarding when you really get to the bottom of it. And so, yeah, I really enjoy it. I've only been doing it, I guess, 7 years or so at this point, but I'm definitely, I I promote it to other mechanical engineers who maybe don't have the idea that this exists. And, it's been a great thing for me to get into.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the reasons that I do this podcast, is to just bring awareness to the expert industry for other engineers and technical people. Because as you've mentioned, there's a lot of gray-haired people that do this type of work, and we've noticed that a lot of those people are starting to retire, and there's a void that is growing with people that understand the engineering and technical part of the work, but also understand the legal and communication part of the work. And so I think it is important to advocate and bring people in and educate people on what expert witness work is, why it's important, and how to do it. So I'm with you on that, and thank you for doing this with me today. All right. So have you ever been reviewing information for a case and found that you are definitely on the wrong side? And if you have, what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, that happens, enough times that you get used to it. I think ultimately our job's to be right, or to get to the right answer. We really are supposed to be independent. And I rarely have ever had a time where any client has seemed to have any pushback or be extremely disappointed by hearing bad news, unfavorable news, I guess, to them. Usually the really good clients get it, and actually they want to know that as early as possible. And, especially like attorneys, they got whatever angle they might work based on what you're telling them. And for us, it's our reputation, right? So I'm not going to jeopardize my reputation long term just to help one case. You gotta think long term on this. But I did have I had at least one plaintiff case, and one was an independent adjuster too, which is kind of like along the same path, where they were clearly trying to get a specific result from me. And you just kind of have to be, and those were uncomfortable. Two of those I'm thinking of happened pretty early on in my time in this, and made you feel kind of crappy, like you were failing your client. But ultimately, I can only say what I can say, and most people, including plaintiffs and everything, in which I think people probably think of this type of scenario more for the plaintiff side, but most everybody is on both sides have been good to work with. And, you build those relationships and credibility with like repeat clients. Cause then if you work with somebody and you've told them the bad news before, then when you tell them like, ooh, this one's pretty favorable to us, they're really going to believe it. And the last thing they want is to get down the road and then be surprised in a negative way. That's not going to be good for your career. So yeah, I mean, I think early on, first times you have those situations, it's kind of uncomfortable. But I guess too, I mean, there's enough clients out there that if somebody's like that all the time, you just don't need to work with them, I guess. Pick the people that are reasonable.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that we talk about in our office is that it's not the expert's job to win the case. The expert's job is to give the attorney the information they need to make their decisions, right? Do they pursue the case? Do they settle? Do they, and the technical aspect oftentimes is very important, but other times it's also just a small piece. So even if, you're giving them bad news on a technical side, it doesn't always mean their case is over or not any good. So
I mean, we're also, like, I try to remind myself, we're like a piece of the puzzle sometimes too. And like, there are other factors that are out of our scope that might have, that might be of consequence to the legal side of things.
yeah.
And I'm not an attorney, and I don't you kind of want to know in general terms, like what they're thinking, to make sure that you think that you're supporting that correctly, but also I don't want to care too much about the specifics of it. So it's kind of a balance where you go, well, I'm telling you what is accurate, and I'm staying within my lane. And if I'm deposed, I'm not going to start speculating about other stuff. And then they're going to handle it. Maybe they'll get a different expert in some other area or whatever. But yeah, staying in your lane, I think, is key. And just know too that they'll take, even if you've got unfavorable news, it might make them go a different direction or have a different strategy. Like the whole legal side is its own. They're really good at their job, and we just have to try to focus on our job, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can only do what the science tells you. So
Mhm.
that's, I guess, one of the nice parts about being an expert.
Yeah. Yeah,
All
it is kind of nice that way that you can just go like, hey man, I don't know. Like, and
right.
it is what it is, and good luck to you. you know,
Yeah, yeah.
thing.
All right. So if you were going to give someone who had just been retained on their first case one piece of advice, what would it be?
Communication is kind of everything. Um, and it's tough when you get a good workload of stuff and you got a lot of balls in the air. Um, Try to really understand what your scope is and what they're asking. Budget, even budget estimates, don't want to surprise them with that either.
Mhm.
But with legal, especially, I've learned to ask up front, like, what are the deadlines of this? I've had different things. I've had where they're retaining me and they need something in a matter of a couple weeks. And you're like, I don't know. Like, in other cases, you got a little more time, and it's just good to know that up front. And also just the nature of the communication in general, keeping them up to date, but also, sometimes you do like an inspection and you have your kind of initial thoughts and everything, and you want to give an update that we did the inspection, this is kind of what we saw, but you don't want to like jump to conclusions, because I've had times where I was at an inspection and I'm like, oh, I think this is going this way. Then you can get back to the office and like digest it, and sometimes you have to do a little more research or new information comes in. So even before you get to like testimony and a written report, you don't want to be flip-flopping back and forth. So sometimes you have to know to just go like, okay, like this is what we did, this is kind of where we're at, I got to do this stuff, and before I get you a final answer. And but yeah, I mean, it's communication's like important in every job. um but I think we've all seen experts maybe that have the book smarts and the experience side, but if you're not good at communicating, um it can be trouble. And you got to be helpful to them. Like you're a piece of the puzzle. You don't want them waiting on you. You don't want them um, in the dark about what's going on. So that's probably it. I mean, because that's where I would probably focus on. And then also asking questions too. I mean, you're consulting them, but also sometimes too, asking more questions can raise a flag about maybe you need to kind of maybe we need to bring in somebody else here. Maybe this is going to get out of my lane, or we if we've got experience being experts on a lot of these cases, you can kind of see ahead where maybe you might have pitfalls or something, and be able to raise flags earlier on. So, you know, ask questions, communicate, always try to pick up the phone and respond to emails as well as quickly as possible. Being responsive and everything. It's, like I said, it's just part of the deal. That's part of being a good expert.
Yeah. We could probably do a whole podcast on communication between attorneys and experts and when and how much and what ways and
Mhm.
you know and everybody tends to like something different as well. So
Mhm.
it's definitely good to get that information up front and make a plan for how to communicate for a case. I
Mhm.
like that. So what do you find makes a good expert or helps an expert to be persuasive?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's kind of back to the communication side too. But first, to do the work and be able to support your opinions, um, because there's different. We don't always get to peel the onion back all the way. There's your confidence. The more work you do, your confidence level can go up. But it's kind of that balance of scope, and it kind of depends on what the client's willing to do. But let's say you get to a point where you've been able to do, basically have pretty solid opinions. That's kind of the first step. And then knowing, what went into those and the work you did, you've got that, in your back pocket. And then in terms of being persuasive, let that do the talking, and just, again, be able to communicate kind of plainly what it is. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard in terms of, um, you know, like I said, you're just really trying to get to the right answer, have your opinions. Don't back off of them if you're being challenged. Know what they are, and how you got to them, and have trust in that. Have confidence in the work you've done, but also confidence in your experience and everything. Um, that's good. That's probably where the persuasive side comes from. Is a healthy amount of confidence, but not overconfidence.
I like that. That's a good way to put that. Uh, all right. So we find that most experts would like to be involved in more cases. What have you found to be the most effective marketing techniques or the best way to get new cases?
Hopefully, podcasts. No, I, it's like word of mouth. Like that's when and that's kind of, as I got more established, I that was like something I kept in my mind as like this would be a good milestone, is when attorneys are calling me directly and not just kind of reaching out generally to the company and looking for experts. You get those ones that call you, they're like, I got another one for you. And you start to build that um, relationship. And so it's word of mouth, and the people that are really busy, I don't think have to do a tremendous amount of marketing. It's always good to get out there and kind of be exposed to the different groups, like a defense attorney association or this or that, or claims people, just to make sure they know you exist and everything. But the people who have been doing this for a while and get established, seem to have more work than they can have anyway, and no need to put a ton of marketing into it. But yeah, I mean, I'm still open to try to just network, talk to people. I think the key is just that people know you exist, and you're in this area, and the other experts know you exist too. I think is key, because they all know each other. They're all, geographically, especially, they know, and they know the good ones and the bad ones and the ones to watch out for. And other experts, I think, are valuable. I mean, you want to have respect amongst them, just because we just do. But also, there's cases they might be conflicted out, but they can help their client by referring, to somebody that they, trust as well, that will do a good job. Because I always found when you're in these cases, and like, the other experts and everyone's on a different side, like, it's actually not usually that adversarial. Like, everyone's kind of there to do the same thing, and I'm on this side this time and whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think it's doing good work, and so you get repeat business and word of mouth. But I put it not just on our direct clients, but the other experts that you work with. I think it's good to have that positive impression out there. And again, I think it's a snowball. Once it gets going, it can be good that way.
Yeah,
I don't think you'll see any
absolutely.
John Zeirke billboards on the side of the road or anything.
I'll keep my eye out for those.
No.
But you're right. This industry, I think in every industry, but this industry maybe more than others, is really based on relationships and reputation. And attorneys are always asking their colleagues, who's a good expert in this field. That's usually the first place they go when they're looking for someone. So having good relationships and doing good work is a great way to bring in more work. So
Because your
totally
work
agree.
gets out there, like, your reports get passed around. Like every time you do a report or testify, you got to assume people are going to see that, and so they're going to know too, and they'll know if you've done a good job or a bad job. But
Mhm.
it's our profession. Like you're just, again, reputation's everything. You want to be professional and do good work, and from that standpoint, it'll pay off, in the long term.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So if you could go, you won't have to go back very far, but if you could go back, is adding expert witness work as a service you provide something you would do again?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, again, going out on my own is a very new, very, very new thing. So call me in a year at least on that. But I'm bullish on that for sure. But yeah, it's kind of, it's the way it's progressed as we talked about it. And I can't imagine going back at this point, just because I see so much potential in this area, and I still got a lot to learn. Clearly, and if I listen to this podcast a year from now or whatever, I'll probably go, man, I didn't know anything. You should always kind of keep moving forward. Um, and things are going to change too. So it's exciting to know too that you're going to learn new things. And yeah, absolutely. It's something I see a lot of good future with.
Awesome. So how can attorneys find you if they need someone with your expertise, John?
Well, my email is john@jzengineer.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to access on there, to get a hold of, and I keep an eye on that. I do have a website, jzengineer.com, and there's a submittal portal on there, for putting in work. But yeah, just search for me. I'm out there. My last name's spelled Zei, not Zie. That's the common mistake. So other than that, yeah, just LinkedIn's usually a good place nowadays for people to find stuff. Otherwise, yeah, email me and we'll get you set up.
Sounds great. Well, John, thank you for your thoughts and your advice today. Thank you for being here. We wish you the best of luck with your new venture, and we're happy to help any way we can.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. Good to meet you.
All right.